Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers, one of the most popular shows on the Pod TV network. That is the show that we delve into the markets, the stock market. We look at stories of the weeks, quote of the weeks, Peter's pick of the week, and of course, a panel discussion. And with that, we're going to bring in the hacker himself, a person who received his bachelor's degree in economics, of course, from the University of California at Los Angeles. Also, he received a law degree from the University of Miami, a master's degree in business administration from NYU. And when he's there, he got the dream or the nightmare, depending how you look at it, spend 17 years on Wall Street, studying the markets and letting us know what we should be doing in terms of taking care of our own situation, or for those financial planners helping their particular clients. The hacker himself is now here, Peter Bennett. Peter, welcome to your show.
Hey, Nick. Hi, audience. I wouldn't say it was a dream work on Wall Street, but I did enjoy most of it. I mean, when you have a job that you go to and you basically don't say, oh, I don't want to get up, I don't want to go to the job. You know, it was usually interesting. There were moments, but mostly it was really good times in terms of, interesting and, it was a good job. Anyway, so welcome to Wall Street Hackers, April 25th, 24. You can catch a new episode almost every week on Thursdays at 1 or Saturdays, depending on your distribution channel. So we always start with the markets. And for over a year and a half, Wall Street Hackers, at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, we've been saying the Fed isn't going to be able to lower rates. Well, the media, the financial media and the markets have finally figured that out, most of them anyway. And the markets aren't too happy about the situation. It only took a year and a half or 2 years. So here's a quote of the week from Hoya Capital, one of the many companies I follow. And it really sums up the situation nicely. Quote, U.S. equity markets posted their worst week in a year. That was last week, by the way, and the markets aren't too happy today for sure. While benchmark interest rates surged to 5-month highs as investors monitored an intensification of geopolitical tensions and hawkish Fed commentary. Inflation, inflamed by resurgent energy prices and insatiable federal government spending, we'll get more into that later, Fed Chair Powell and the other officials acknowledged a stalling out of inflation progress in recent months and delayed cut expectations. So basically, probably no cuts this year, maybe December, who knows, but it won't be a whole lot. It won't be the 7 they were projecting in December for sure. So the markets are catching up with what I was calling a delusional market for so long. But now that's all known information. So Wall Street Hackers has to say, well, what's next? Because that information is known and it's mostly incorporated in the market. We'll see how far it goes down. Now there's being incorporated in the market, but it is known information. So I would also point out, by the way, that as of 10 a.m. this morning, the SPY, which is the S&P ETF, was at 498. And on December 20th, 2021, it was at 478. So you may have heard over the years, new highs for the S&P 500, everything's great. The market's high, the market's doing great. But that is a 5.7% return on the S&P in 2 1/3 years. And that works out to about 2.4% a year, which is substantially less than inflation. Inflation has been running about 6% on average for the last 3 years. And it also includes those hot tech companies, many of them that were part of the Magnificent Seven, that were booming during that period. So if not for them, it would even be worse. But you've actually lost money against inflation in the market. So it's worth noting at least the delusion of the mainstream media when they're saying, the S&P is hitting new highs. So anyway, that's all in the past, as I said, known information, and now we have to look forward. So there's two areas of predictions we're making now. One is more in the short and medium term, and one, which we're going to discuss during the panel discussion of the week more, is long term. The short and medium term, can never be positive of anything, but I am basically saying we're going to have now flatter for longer. And that's not just flat or for longer in terms of the market, especially against inflation, but also I think we're going to have flat rates and, mediocre market performance in general. So why? The Fed can't really raise rates a whole lot more. One, they're willing to just wait longer and longer until their rate increases do impact the economy, and eventually they will, or inflation will, because that is like a tax. But also, if they raise rates more, they're going to have a regional bank crisis that's going to be phenomenal. They don't want to cause that. So they don't want to cause an economic crisis in the banks. On the other side, the Fed can't lower rates a lot because we're behind the curve in raising them, basically. And now inflation is somewhat out of control. The biggest reasons, of course, totally out of control government spending, basically. We'll be discussing more on that during our panel discussion again. Low unemployment, below 4%, and quite possibly higher energy prices, and certainly very likely year over year higher energy prices. And we'll see what happens this summer, but none of that says the Fed can cut. So they just have to play this very slow game. And since the market now knows that what the Fed's going to do, which is basically hold rates steady for a long time, there's no real impetus for the market to go up or down a lot. Of course, you can pick the right companies, which takes the micro view rather than the macro view. But that's what we're saying for this year at least, flattish overall, which makes it a very hard market for finding the right stocks. It's a lot of work to find the right stocks in this market. And then for our long-term prediction, we're going to be getting into yield curve control, which is almost 100%. And it's as close to 100% that they're going to try. It's 100% they're going to try to use it. And we're going to discuss that and what the implications are in terms of investing. So, and the question will be, by the way, what will happen if politicians don't cut spending and debt, which looks like the picture right now. And we'll get into that. So, four most interesting stories of the week. Number one, the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe at this moment today, is listening to arguments that whether trying the leading president candidate on approximately 90 counts in 4 different courts is election interference. I guess I have to say, if you look at the word interference, which I didn't do on the dictionary, then I think that's interference. If it isn't interference, then Russia and Cuba are definitely free and fair societies and democracies. I think the Supreme Court is very likely by the end of May, maybe Memorial Day, to say, yes, you can't have the presidential candidate in court, especially on the New York charges, but in general. And New York is a perfect example of how outrageous this is. So in New York, he's being tried on 8-year-old at most misdemeanor charges for doing an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels, in which he paid her off, basically. And this is not really a crime, one, and if it is, it's a misdemeanor. The federal prosecutors declined to prosecute, and they probably would have loved to prosecute if they could, if they were political, and they probably are. But the New York courts say they're trying to make this crazy definition. But if you don't believe that, here's what is going on in the New York courts. That just shows what a sham this is. So the New York courts almost always usually schedule Monday through Thursday as their court dates. Why? Because probably the judges want to take a 3-day weekend. Everybody wants a 3-day weekend. The lawyers, whatever. Friday is not an active day in court. But this court decided they're going to try Trump on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. They're using Fridays instead of Wednesdays. Could it be that they want to keep him in court so he can't travel? It looks pretty suspicious to me. You can't have a presidential candidate being tied up by a judicial system. They're supposed to be separate branches. Interesting story number 2. So Wall Street Hackers has been very critical of the Biden administration's energy policies. And not only because of the effect on inflation and economics, but because they're actually been very bad for the environment. You want proof? The U.S. and worldwide carbon emissions were higher in 22 than 21, higher in 23 than 22, and probably going to be higher this year again. Why are emissions going up? Well, policies like attacking gas, natural gas, equally with coal, or almost equally with coal and oil. So what happens is when you don't have the natural gas, you burn oil and coal. Number two, closing down production of energy in cleaner countries like the United States and shipping it over to countries that don't have environmental standards or have very low environmental standards. So the other thing you hear on Wall Street Hackers, my number one beef is with the mainstream press in the United States and the world, basically. It used to be they had ethics and would report all the information and let people decide. Now they have a mission to show people narratives. So here's a perfect example of both. It's just perfect. This is from an article from ABC News. Biden administration bars drilling on millions of acres in Alaska. It says the administration announced on Friday that would block off oil and gas drilling on 13 million acres in the Western Arctic that are a part of the area known as the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska. The article is filled with positive comments and hardly anything even borderline negative. Just great. It closes with the Biden administration's choice to reject the Ambler Road project is a monumental step forward in the fight for indigenous rights and environmental justice. So is that one-sided? Let's look at what the article didn't leave out. And this is so typical. Number one, the actions are going to increase energy prices in the U.S. Number two, and these, again, not a mention of any of this, it will make the U.S. more dependent on foreign oil. Number three, from an environmental standpoint, it's going to block drilling in Alaska, which has very strict environmental standards. And it's going to ship the production of oil to countries that have no environmental standards or very little environmental standards. That's not good for the environment. They didn't mention that many Alaskan tribesmen and some tribes are extremely upset that their jobs are going to be lost because they used to work on these fields, or they work in oil. Number five, that the ruling was very arguably, if not totally illegal, very arguably illegal, because it overrules multiple laws that were passed in Congress. I believe the first one was 100 years ago, and it was by executive action, and the Congress is supposed to be the one who's creating the laws. And finally, there was no mention of the fact that there are critical elements on those lands, critical minerals that are going to be needed for environmental projects, and the United States isn't going to get access to those either. So was that a one-sided story? I think so. Interesting story number three. It's kind of interesting why Israel did not respond to Iran's 300 to 350 missile and drone attack in a complex way and with a big attack. Basically, they made a simple attack on one military base. Why? Well, it was meant to send a message to the Islamic Republic. And how it did it is the attack totally evaded Tehran's radar detection. In other words, none of the drones and at least one missile were even detected at all. So it showed Israel's power to strike Tehran if it wants. And also, the military base was near an Iranian nuclear site. So it's kind of a warning. It's like, okay, this time, no, but next time, probably yes. So it was interesting why they had a moderate strategy, and hopefully everybody in the Middle East will calm down, obviously. Interesting story number four. We always try to go to something a little lighter. The global market for humanoid robots is now projected to be $38 billion in 2035, with potential shipments of 1.4 million to 6.5 million units per year. Yes, up to 6 million units a year of robots by 2035. Tesla's Optimus humanoid robot is leading the way, with other companies like Agility Robotics, Boston Dynamics, Figure A1, and Sanctuary AI also make advancements. This, by the way, is why I didn't short Tesla too long. One of the reasons I had suggested shorting Tesla, should have stuck with it even further, but did well with that. And I could see Tesla not even being in the car business in 15 years, potentially, or being a weak player, but they may be dominant in robots, and that's a big market. So we will see what Tesla does, but here is a picture of your future, or the future of your housekeeper. Here is a picture of your potential bartender in 10 years. And here is hopefully not a picture of the Terminator in 10 years. But these are real robots that are coming out soon. And that is a major industry, and also a reason why chips will be fairly successful, although that's not an industry we do a lot with. Again, because our strategy is grab income, grab yield, and try to stay with more solid things that are sure right now. So we will take a short break, and we'll be back with the dividend pick of the week in our panel discussion. See you in a moment.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Culiet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner, and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office, to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252.
So the what to do section, and this pretty much hasn't changed for years and probably won't, but this week we're going to really start digging into deeper about more what to do. And you'll hear that in the panel discussion, and what to do in terms of what we expect in the future. So as always, we say own pipelines, number one. It's probably the only place now where you can get high yield, probably almost 100% safety, and you can also get growth. And that's what, there's many investors who want one of those three. They're sort of divided, the investors, into those three categories. But I want all three when I can get it. And I love pipelines, especially MPLX and EPD, long-term large allocations. We'll also own some energy production in case inflation goes through the roof in terms of energy. This is another clear one. Whatever allocation you have to stock should so clearly be in dividend stocks. Our favorite chart that we show in many weeks, although we probably show it next week because we haven't shown it for a while, shows that for 50 years to 2022, dividend stocks doubled the performance of the S&P 500, doubled. And dividend growth and initiators tripled the S&P 500. And by the way, if you look at non-dividend payers, they had a really sad return. It was like a minimal fraction of what the dividend payers paid. So they were pulling things down. Finally, be very careful right now. We're getting into a tough market environment because now the market's starting to price in things correctly in terms of inflation's here for a while, rates aren't coming down, and I don't know how big this dip will be, obviously, because I'm not a short-term trader, but it's tough to find the right investments, and you need to start preparing for really the next phase, which we'll be discussing. So dividend stock of the week. First, disclaimers: this show's only for entertainment. No guarantees, of course. Never a guarantee on any investments. Only our opinions, and consult your financial advisor. So this week's pick is interesting. It's CAPL, Cross America Partners Limited Partnership. And this is the conclusion of a long series I've been doing on energy stocks. I did the pipelines. I did the producers like KRP and STR, smaller allocations, but a good hedge against higher energy prices for the rest of the portfolio. But now a different kind of stock, CAPL. CAPL is a wholesale distributor of motor fuels, convenience store operator, and owner and lessee of real estate used in the retail distribution of motor fuels. In English, basically, they're in the gas station business, and they own gas stations, and they provide supplies for gas stations, fuel for gas stations. And there's a lot of things I like about CAPL, but right now I'm just doing a starter allocation of 0.25%, but I'll watch it and maybe add more later. There's a lot of reasons I do like it. First of all, it has a yield of 9.1%. Because it's in a limited partnership, it does have extra counting, but it also has very tax-favored treatment. So it can do very well in terms of after-tax return. When you can get 9% a year, it only takes roughly 11 years till you have every penny back. And I don't think gas stations are going anywhere soon, for sure. It has a price to cash flow of 6.2 times. So that's a cash flow yield of 16%, easily covering the dividend. And they can use that extra money for reinvestment, for growth, for paying the dividend. So why not more? One, because we have so much energy right now, because the pipelines and other energy stocks have done so well. I don't want to be more than 30% roughly energy. And the other thing is, I'm a little concerned that if oil prices, particularly, go up really high, or we go into a deep recession, then maybe people will start cutting back substantially on their driving. I don't think that's going to happen. But for 0.25% initially, 9% yield, I'll take it. And, it's a little piece, but it's a good start. So, by the way, in the next weeks, then I'm going to get into a couple of weeks of bond strategies, and then we're going to get to some dividend stocks that are non-energy. So panel discussion of the week. Nick will be coming on. The question is, what happens if politicians never cut spending and debt because of political pressures? So background. Those in the media who even mention the national debt, because many of them don't even want to talk about it, generally cite a $34.5 trillion figure. In fact, the U.S. national debt, 100%, give or take, is $125 trillion because of unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security. The money, basically, for an aging population in the United States, a lot of it has been spent, especially the Medicare money. Now, the $125 trillion, first of all, for perspective, is more money than the entire U.S. stock market, the U.S. entire bond market, and all privately held real estate in the United States combined. That's a lot of money. Other countries in the world, the way, are not immune at all. I've looked at countries in Asia, Europe, South America, and they all have very similar situations. They have aging populations. They've offered free health care. They have underfunded liabilities for retirement plans. So it's not like the money will go, oh, no, we have to leave the United States. The whole world's going to be facing these issues. Also, so more background. Politicians, as everybody knows, rarely cut spending. And counting unfunded liabilities, the United States hasn't had a balanced budget in decades. I have to look how far back, maybe before World War II, or if ever, I don't know. But it's been a long time. The House recently sent a bill, is my understanding, to form a fiscal stability commission to the Senate to at least look at the issue. They've had commissions before and they basically ignored them, but at least now they're saying, okay, let's send a bill and we'll create a commission to at least look at the issue, but it's sitting in the Senate. So the Senate doesn't even want to look at the issue. It's like, oh, maybe it's a bad election year, whatever topic, but this is an urgent matter. So there doesn't seem to be any priority on the issue, to say the least, for decades, and they've been kicking the can down the road. This is ultimately going to be almost 100% a gigantic economic tsunami that's going to affect the world. And we're not talking about like 15 years anymore. We're talking about 5 years, 10 years. There were projections back in 2000 and 2010 that this would hit around now, and now we're getting to now. So we're getting very close to where this is really going to become a crisis. So the question is for Nick and I, what happens if politicians never cut, which seems fairly likely, spending and debt because of the political pressures? What do you think, Nick?
Well, I'm glad you brought that subject up because, first of all, as the Honorable David Walker has said, we have a fiscal cancer. It's not a heart attack. We're not going to die tomorrow, but we do have cancer, and it's a slow, progressive death. Well, what's going to happen is it looks like this. You've probably already seen the effects of a thing called inflation. Mm-hmm. And because we're not going to raise taxes because the Republicans don't want it, we're not going to lower our government spending because the Democrats don't want it, then what's going to happen, which we're already seeing right now, is inflation, potentially hyperinflation, which they had in Germany prior to World War II, mm-hmm. and inflation that exists in Argentina today, where they finally decide to put a hedge on it. But inflation in Argentina was running 8% a month.
Wow.
Okay. So we're heading that direction, and it will take place before the end of this decade. The first thing to go bust will be the Medicare. And that's the reason we're talking about the unfunded liabilities, Peter, in healthcare. We have a trust fund that right now has money that's been supplementing. Well, that trust fund will run out of money at the end of this decade, which means in the next 6 years, Medicare will go broke. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're going to see the first crisis, because now you can't hide it under the bus. You can't hide the liabilities under the bus because there will be no money to pay Medicare. That'll be the first one to go bust. Next decade, Social Security is going to go bust.
Not too
They're
far.
not going to be able to hide that either. So we're looking for anybody who's listening who will be on this planet in the next 20 years or 10 years. They're going to witness most of us, right? They're going to witness the bust of Social Security and Medicare for the first time. Politicians have all said, "Hey, we're here to protect it. We're going to make sure that Social Security, Medicare stays around. If so, we're going to draw on the U.S. government to pay for it, but the U.S. government has a problem. A national debt's $34
Let me jump in because we're, as always, short on time. We always never barely finish these discussions because there's so much stuff.
We have
about half an hour. But here's my conclusions. Number one, this is basically 100%. The governments of the world and the United States, being one of them, is going to use yield curve control to try to lower long-term interest rates down to zero or negative. The United States did this in World War II. Japan did it for over a decade.
Japan did it, yes.
Recently, and I just read, interestingly, that Australia even played around with it recently. I don't know what time frame it was, but this is not a secret yield curve control. You can look it up. We won't get into the specifics, but it's basically printing money to control long-term rates. Mm-hmm. And that's 100%. There isn't, and how do we know that too? Because there isn't enough money in the world to pay off this debt. And also, if you raise taxes a lot, certainly it's going to impact the economy. And there's a lot of evidence that will actually lower government revenue. So they can't just raise taxes. The only solution is printing money. Last month, Bank of America's Michael Hartnett mentioned the possibility of yield curve control, which you don't hear much about other than the show and maybe some other places, but not much. And he said, the reason yield curve control can become part of the debate is that investors rather than voters are likely to force fiscal discipline on the U.S. government. I would almost say that's right. It's basically not just investors. It's that the U.S. government doesn't have a choice. Now, the American Institute for Economic Research said, quote, no better or more reliable forecast of the U.S. business cycle has existed in recent decades than the initial shape of the U.S. Treasury curve. So that means basically we're going to get an inverted yield curve, and we're running out of time as always. I even cut it back to 4 this time. Interesting stories. But so the bottom line is, I'm going to get into it more next week. We're going to get into the specific real assets. You want real asset and real income streams based to deal with the inflation or stagflation. That's pretty much 100% going to happen. If you don't own that, you're going to really be struggling with inflation and stagflation and keeping up. Because inflation is a tax and stagflation is even worse, and we're heading that way. So Thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. We'll be back next week. As Kim says, get healthy, get wealthy. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.